When I left Christian fundamentalist churches and religion, I realized that Christians don't support no-fault divorce. Now, for those who aren't aware of what no-fault divorce is, it hasn't been around very long. It became very popular in the 60s and 70s when you didn't have to have a reason for getting a divorce. Before the 70s, you had to have what we call a legitimate reason why you got divorced. You had to prove adultery, abandonment, or it was a process. And then they decided to make a no-fault divorce where you can leave a divorce for any reason and just leave for any legitimate or selfish reason. And this taught a generation of women, you don't have to stay in an abusive, uncomfortable, or unwanted relationship just because you can't prove that the partner you have did anything wrong. This set women free to leave any environment they just weren't happy with. And you don't have to have a reason to be unhappy. When I say that Christian nationalists and Christian churches have really never supported no-fault divorce, it's because one of the cornerstones of Christianity is the belief that marriage is for life and that nothing should break apart marriages. This has created a potential toxic, unhealthy dynamic where women are trapped in relationships, marriages, and arrangements that are sometimes loveless and intimacy-free relationships. And I'm not talking about asexual people. I'm talking about people that are so unhappy or they're just not interested in any form of intimacy because they're bored, unhappy, or any legitimate reason. The reason why Christians don't like no-fault divorce is because they have an unrealistic expectation that relationships are sacred, holy, biblical, and that they symbolize a made-up image of Christ and the church. With all this potential for a awful dynamic, especially when you believe that men are the pinnacle of God's creation and that men are in charge. What happens if a man takes advantage of all the privilege he's been given by religion? Well, if you believe in an environment where no-fault divorce doesn't exist or is not supported, unless he or she is caught in adultery or completely abandons you, there's no chance to get out. You're stuck. Men, and especially religious Christians, they want to return to a time where women were men's property. They want to make it as hard as possible to leave abusive, unlovable, inconvenient circumstances. It's not realistic to believe marriage lasts for life. People change, evolve. As long as you're in an environment where you don't have to stay if you don't want to, for any legitimate reason, you shouldn't have to. There's something about Christianity that doesn't like people to have autonomy. Just because you're married to someone doesn't mean you're one person. Doesn't mean you can't have your own identity. And if you're in a bad situation, anything that keeps you from leaving is the villain of a story. No-fault divorce is something Christians don't believe in because it mars the picture of their biblical beliefs. And when you have unrealistic expectations and create a power imbalance between men and women, the dynamics of believing that men are superior and women are only to have children and be in the kitchen, this is an environment where I am really surprised if abuse does not happen. And I'm happy that it doesn't, but I'm shocked. You have all the ingredients for an abusive, control, just terrible dynamics. And if you don't have abuse or some kind of control situation, I'm shocked. And yes, there are very wonderful biblical marriages, but you don't need a God or viewing your relationship as sacred, consecrated, and an image of perfection for your marriage to be important or to last. You don't need a preacher saying something about your marriage for it to be holy. Anytime you add religion or patriarchy to a situation that's already precarious with a 50 to 60 chance of failing, people stay together because they don't know anything else. People like Anna and Josh Duggar, she cannot divorce him. Even if, and I mean, she has enough evidence of adultery to clean up in the courtroom. She won't leave him because of her religion. I feel compassion for people who can't leave because they can. Unless you're in a country that doesn't forbid divorce or has the opposite of no-fault divorce, you can leave at any time. Only two things keep people in a bad relationship: fear and indoctrination. And I made a video earlier today about Christians are experts in gaslighting. Not all Christians, obviously, but it's part of the DNA of Christianity. All religion starts with a lie. You're either a bad person or you need saving. And really, any person or institution that says they know what happens after death or have hidden secrets, they're selling something. Nobody knows what happens after death, because nothing happens after death. You're dead. That isn't a secret. And when religion supports or doesn't support things that save, protect, and give women the opportunity to live and blossom, you are creating a dynamic, and they know it, of male privilege. They want to trap women in relationships that wear a woman down. Did you know that women are more likely to develop autoimmune conditions? The more stress you're in, you are heaping odds and statistics onto yourself for developing an autoimmune condition, because that's how women's bodies deal with stress. And I'm not saying that every autoimmune condition is because of abuse and stress. I'm saying that your body as a woman handles stress differently than a man. And women will always have more stress than men, unless you're in a coma. If you're a normal, healthy, breathing woman, you will always have more stress on you than a man, because you work harder than a man. You have more expectations than a man has on himself. And Christianity will never support no-fault divorce because it goes against the very makeup of their ideology. You ask Christians, if you ask 100 Christians, what are the prerequisites to get divorced? You're going to get adultery. Some will say abandonment. Others will say other reasons. But I would say 90% of Christians will all agree that adultery is okay to get divorced. But they'll always say, but you don't have to. You can have your spouse dead to rights, being an awful human being, a predator, anything. And Christians will still say, but you don't have to divorce. Because the image of respectability is more important than somebody's comfort or somebody's safety. That's just the way religion works. I've heard of pastors who knew that a woman's life was in danger, and they still counsel them to reconcile. We should not live in a mentality where a man has to hit a woman for her to leave. You leave before it escalates to actual contact with somebody else. If someone doesn't treat you right, verbally and emotionally destroys your self-esteem and how you view your life, the gaslighting, half of that is enough to leave and never see home again. Christianity has created the image of respectability because they would rather you're miserable and married than thriving and blooming as a divorced person. That is why Christianity worships marriage, family, and heteronormative values. It's all about man's comfort. And if they can villainize something and make it illegal, something that protects women and protects their autonomy, their safety, I could bet money Christians would not support it. And it never surprises me the level religion will stoop to maintain control. That's why Christians give money, support, and vote people into office that don't believe in female reproduction rights, abortion rights, because they don't see women as human. And at the end of the day, they don't want no-fault divorce to remain the law of the land in every state because it takes away the power of women's choice. Because, and I read the statistic, my therapist gave it to me, 70% of divorces are initiated by women. 7 out of 10 people, women divorce their spouses. Why? Because we live in an age where we don't have to stay in miserable marriages like our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers were forced to do. We don't have to have a man's baby. We don't have to remain in a home life that's so dangerous for us. And if you're not happy, find a way to be happy. And yeah, people can get divorced for selfish reasons because they don't want to pay child support. They don't want to have baggage like a wife or children. So yeah, there are selfish reasons to get divorced. But at the end of the day, do you really want to be married to someone who does not want you as their spouse? Only a pick-me girl would want to be somebody's wife if he doesn't want you as his wife. I would rather live life by myself, thriving with degrees and accomplishments, awards, than be married to somebody who just can't divorce me because of the law. And no-fault divorce has always benefited women more than it's benefited men. Because men can live in the worst environment possible, and they seldom divorce and leave for another woman, because why divorce your wife when you can have your cake and eat it too? That's why married men almost never leave their wives. They would rather have a wife and a girlfriend than have one wife. They get both ends of the candlestick. No-fault divorce saves women's lives. And Christians have never supported female autonomy. They can lie and say, sure, we believe in it, but at the end of the day, who do they vote for? Donald Trump. And he has never protected reproduction rights ever. So what can we say about it? It's just typical Republican Christian crappy behavior. And if you don't like it, get smart and vote some other way, and don't be members or believe in these horrible institutions. because it's all about protecting men. And if women or children die in the process, well, it's just gravy. And that is a terrible way